Listen to this. A CNN correspondent is suggesting House Republicans have blood on their hands for blocking a foreign aid package that would have sent more money to Ukraine. Listen to this question.
Mr. President, would you go as far as to say that election involving blood is on the hands of House Republicans right now?
I wouldn't use that term. They're making a big mistake not responding.
Joe Concha is a Fox News contributor, and Joe joins us now. And Joe, Biden was like, whoa, 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 I'm not even going that far. What kind of a question was that?
That was a question that says, wow, CNN trails MSNBC, so let's be more like MSNBC, and asking insane questions in order to, I guess, go viral is the goal. And this is the CNN now post Chris Licht as far as being activists instead of journalists. So basically the premise is if Republicans had sent billions of aids to Ukraine, that would have changed the decision by Vladimir Putin to murder his longtime political rival, who he had already jailed, Alexei Navalny. I mean, it's insane. And it just shows you how far journalists have gone to become activists. The bottom line is that we have sent well over $100 billion to Ukraine with no explanation on how to negotiate an end to this war, which is in perpetual stalemate in eastern Ukraine. We could be talking about this war 5 years from now, Carly and Todd, and it could still be in the same exact state. Americans want to know, why are we sending all this money over there when nothing seems to be happening? Ukraine can't push Russia out. Russia can't push any more in. At some point, we have to think about, how do we exit here while we bankrupt our own country?
Joe, there's also this. The Biden campaign is reportedly planning to use the State of the Union to rebound from Robert Hur's report on the president's mental state. This is according to Axios. Yeah. Quote, everyone around him is well aware of the need to jack his campaign up. The only way to deal with the negative aftershocks of the special counsel's report slamming Biden's age is for the president to be out there, to be visible, to be strong of presence and strong of voice. What do you think about this? The State of the Union is on March 7th.
Yeah, and look, we saw the president's schedule last week where he barely had any events on it. He promised to take questions from reporters, and that never happened. He hasn't done a television interview with any news outlet since October. Think about that for a moment, in a campaign season, in an election year. Look, there is no reset. The impression of Joe Biden's record is etched in stone in the minds of American voters. They know what he and his administration have done to destroy anything that resembles enforcing the laws and securing a lawless U.S. southern border, per Griff Jenkins' report earlier with you guys. And they know about spending that has still led to way too high inflation. They know about violent crime in American cities where Democratic DAs have a revolving door policy regarding arresting and releasing criminals. And they know about a president who takes more vacation than, Clark Griswold, and has little to no events on his schedule, including today, where he has nothing until the afternoon, where he flies to California and has a campaign reception where he probably won't take any questions from reporters, and then flies back tomorrow, where he'll probably have nothing on his schedule again because the flight is just too darn long. So this is where we're at as far as Joe Biden. It's a lose-lose proposition. If they put him in front of reporters, there's cleanups on aisles 5, 8, 24, and 17 as far as what he says. And if they hide him, he looks like a coward. Either way, this is not the candidate that most Democrats even want running at this point, Todd.
And Clark Griswold was actually very busy on vacation, putting up multiple trees, lights, a lot of stuff he had to do. Meantime, the ladies of The View had some interesting takes on a possible Trump versus Biden debate. Listen.
Biden can lose, and he can lose in a debate. Trump will not. The people supporting Trump will support him whether he's there or not.
But that's
Biden makes one mistake, and people that are undecided are out.
And we do know he's also, if Biden flubs, they'll be all over him. If Trump flubs,
but if he doesn't show up, they'll be all over. My caution to Biden is, I get why he maybe wouldn't, but Donald Trump will lean into the narrative of he's hiding because he's not up to it, and voters will believe that if he doesn't show up. So he needs to show up in debate.
These are good points.
First time I've said this on this show. Joe, they're not wrong. Final thoughts to you.
They are not wrong. I don't think Joe Biden will debate Donald Trump in the end. He'll say, I will not give a stage or share a stage with a man who I feel is beneath me. In some sort of form, they'll make an excuse for Joe Biden not to do 1 or 2 or 3 of those debates where 70, 80 million people may be watching, because there is no teleprompter to save Joe Biden in those situations. They'll find an excuse to get out and hope to win by the basement strategy. It's just not going to work, guys. People will not accept that.
Joe, thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.